The tallest tree alive on Earth today stands 350 feet tall. It has been growing for over 1,000 years, and it cannot reach 1/3 of the height of Devil's Tower. That is not a poetic comparison. That is a measurement. Devil's Tower rises 867 feet above its base. Shiprock rises 1,583 feet above the surrounding plain. The tepuis of Venezuela exceed 9,000 feet. These formations exist all over the world. Different countries, different continents, different geological classifications, all of them dwarfing the largest living thing on Earth by a margin that has never been explained. Now here is the question nobody asks. If the landscape was shaped by the same biological system that lives in it today, the proportions should match. They do not match. The tallest forests that existed before any logging, before any human clearing, before any industrial extraction, reached heights of 250 feet at their absolute maximum. Still not even close to 1/3 of Devil's Tower. So what shaped this landscape? Because it was not the trees that are living in it now, and it was not the trees that existed before those trees were cut down. Something else was here. Something the landscape still carries the shape of. Something so large that everything growing on this earth today fits inside its shadow. And the most uncomfortable part of this story is not the theory. It is the fact that we have never looked. Not because the technology to look does not exist, because the question has never been considered worth asking. In the 1870s, a geologist named Clarence Dutton spent 12 years mapping the Colorado Plateau. Not a curious amateur, not someone looking for mysteries, a trained professional doing serious scientific fieldwork for the United States government. And in his published field notes, he wrote something that his colleagues absorbed as a curiosity and never investigated. He described the layering patterns in the canyon walls he was surveying as uncomfortably similar to cross-sections of wood. His words, not an interpretation, not a modern reading placed onto an old text. A trained geologist with 12 years of field experience in some of the most studied terrain in North America looked at the walls around him and wrote that they reminded him of wood. His colleagues called it pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in unfamiliar material, the same phenomenon that makes people see faces in clouds. But pareidolia explains random pattern recognition. It does not explain why a trained geologist independently arrives at the same structural comparison that the Lakota people had already been carrying in their description of formations like Bear Lodge for generations before Dutton ever set foot on the plateau. The Lakota did not describe Bear Lodge as a rock formation that looked like wood. They described it as something that grew, something that was, in some accounts, cut. Two completely separate traditions, one scientific, one indigenous, no contact with each other, arriving at the same description of the same formations independently. That is not pareidolia. That is a pattern, and patterns in science are supposed to generate questions. This one generated nothing. Dutton filed his notes. His colleagues moved on. The observation sat in the literature for over a century, labeled as a curiosity, and never seriously followed up on. But here is what makes it impossible to fully dismiss. The proportions support it, not poetically, mathematically. The documented ratio of trunk diameter to height in large coniferous tree species falls within a specific range, consistent across species, consistent across documented specimens, a number that follows from the physics of how trees grow and how they distribute structural load across their vertical extent. Apply that ratio to the isolated buttes of the American Southwest. The numbers match, not approximately, within the documented range. Apply it to Devil's Tower, match. Monument Valley, match. The tepuis of Venezuela, match. 4 continents. Completely different official geological classifications. No scientific connection to each other. One ratio connecting all of them. The same ratio that belongs to trees. And here is the detail that the geological literature has never resolved. Shiprock in New Mexico rises 1,583 feet above the surrounding plain. 3 radial structures extend outward and slightly downward from its base. The official explanation is that these are ancient magma flows that hardened in horizontal cracks in the surrounding rock and were later exposed by erosion. Horizontal magma flows do not run downward. They follow the path of least resistance, which is lateral, not vertical. These structures run downward from the central formation. Downward is not what volcanic structures do. Downward is what root systems do. The angle has been noted in the geological literature. It has not generated a formal alternative hypothesis, because the alternative hypothesis falls outside the categories that the geological literature currently maintains. The category does not exist, and questions that fall outside existing categories do not receive funding. They do not generate research programs. They do not produce academic careers. They sit in field notes written by serious scientists